Hey, welcome to episode 14 of Worth 1000 Words, where I write a 1000 word short story based on a piece of artwork. If you're new here, my name is Jason and I write fiction. And today, the artwork I chose is somewhat different. I chose it on purpose to challenge myself more because when you see it, you'll know that it doesn't immediately bring a scene to mind, at least to me, maybe to you. Now, that's not to say that the image isn't rich with detail. There's plenty of detail there, but for whatever reason, just nothing struck me. I didn't see a story unfold before my eyes. So I thought, what a good way to just try to hang myself up and give my subconscious even more time to wander and explore and try to figure the whole thing out. The artwork really reminded me of a film called Stalker by Tarkovsky. If you haven't seen it, it's a great film. It's a long film and it requires a lot of patience and it's very slow, but the imagery is really amazing, and for whatever reason, that really carries it through for me, the mystery, the atmosphere, and because of that, I decided to choose some music. This is an old favorite of mine that I haven't listened to in a long time, but it is entitled Stalker, and it's a collaboration between two ambient musicians named Robert Rich and Lustmord. If you know who those two gentlemen are, then you'll know that they do create very brooding soundscapes, and I thought it would be a great accompaniment to this writing session. All right, with that said, let's check out what I'm talking about. On to the artwork. Today's artwork is by Anton Semenov, an illustrator and digital artist out of Bratsk, Russia, and it is titled Homeland. And as you can see, this is not usually the kind of artwork I write to, but as I said, that was on purpose. I wanted to do something to challenge myself a little bit. And here we have this old man, or maybe a young man who is damaged. He's weathered, and he's playing an accordion of some kind with a little missing peg there. And there's a Tim Burton-esque dog behind him. But that's about it. We see that he's in some kind of desolate forest. There's fog or ash or something else in the background, some kind of haze. And I really love this guy's work. I mean, if you check out his profile on ArtStation, you can see that his style is very consistent. He has a lot of pieces on there that are just as cool as this one. It's very sculptural. I almost thought it was 3D modeling or 3D sculpting that had a paint over, but it appears as though he does these in Photoshop. So really, really cool execution, and he seems to have quite the following, and I can see why. All right, well, now it is time to see what I came up with. On to the story. The sky wept, leaves and snow, or was it ash? His skin, scarred from something beyond memory, didn't allow him to feel. His eyes, filmed with whatever grew over wet eyes after tears had dried, didn't allow him to see. Hear, however, he could. Ears wide open, the sky's music sighed, whispered, sang. To him, who else was there? Someone at his feet, a skittering among the scattering. A whine? Perhaps. Clickety-clack, clack. Slurp? Nothing was wet here. It must have been his imagination. Holes on the right, buttons on the left. Fingers skittered across that landscape like the skittering at his feet. He feared that phantom wouldn't allow him to concentrate. Right hand up and down, careful to keep the pads of his fingers mobile, sensitive. The only place unscarred. Left hand, half steps away, crept and crawled. He imagined them insects, agile, with a precognition him incapable of. Who was he? These questions. The mouth of his mind spoke because he had none on his face. But who would he speak to? The skittering thing? The sky who never listened? When would it run out of tears like him? When would it shed the last? Would it open again to let in the light? An embrace was missing, a squeeze, and he matched the voice of the sky. Always he found it, that key, minor, never major, melancholic. What did that mean when it was everything? Shouldn't it lose meaning? bleed into the gray fog he knew was there just beyond the dull milk of his sight, broken with the faintest vertical lines that reached up into the darkness where the sun should be, used to be. He let the sky have a measure, the wind, which was the voice of the sky, of course. He wasn't one to steal the stage. Him, a husk of something that once was. His feet, numb stumps, immovable as stone, did the impossible. They shifted. His left. He looked down out of habit. Shadows played. A cup he remembered. For coin or drink? The passers-by, his patrons, would grant him their medal when they were pleased, or when he was pitied. It didn't make any difference which one. Especially now. The road was empty. Had it always been? He stole another measure as the sky was getting overzealous in its composition. It was a dance. It was a battle. Neither could let the other win, else the world fall apart. His seat was cold. Whatever he wrapped himself in had lessened the decay, the disease, or some other thing that began with D, the final of which he wouldn't have spoken even if he had a mouth. He recalled his seat from memory as his fingers competed with the sky. When no one passed by, he'd twist the wire that always made its way to him around the legs, up the back. He thought it might elevate his position, give him a throne of sorts, something to mark the subtlety and the mastery of his work. Boasting again. It was unbecoming. She had said. Who was she? That part, that person was more shadow than the infinity before him and surely behind him. He heard a seashell then, the moaning of pain or pleasure. There were no seashells anymore, not anywhere. He was sure of it even though he hadn't moved from the spot in. Time was an abstract. Anyway, the seashell. It was the sky playing with him, hurling its voice in a spiral form that further spiraled into the spiral of his ear. Tricky. His fingers moved faster, all of his joints working, double, triple time, beyond that of which the sky was capable. Some might say effortless. Some had said effortless, hadn't they? His elbow knocked something, a vague pressure, left. He had to remember directions in case he ever got out of this place, or if someone asked. Who were these apparitions that glittered in the depths, feeding him nonsense? His ear perked up to the sound, the percussive rat-a-tat. A sound within a sound, a wind? Just as the words began to have meaning, the sound ceased. That was all right. It gave him a new tempo to follow, and by the sound of it, the sky hadn't heard. It fell behind. He looked over his metaphorical shoulder down the path of leaves and ash, or was it snow? And laughed with his metaphorical mouth, quietly, though. It was for himself, not for belittlement. A skittering among the scattering. It darted, weaved, pulled shadow-like ink, spattered it, across the path ahead to trip him up. And it did. His fingers tripped, all 10 legs to fall on through the path. One getting caught in a hole that didn't let go. Tendons stretched and then snapped, letting bone break. He composed himself. He had time. The sky was still somewhere behind. 9 legs were upright, the 10th still lost in that hole. He twisted and yanked. The skin where his mouth should be stretched in a silent scream. It was out, his shortest leg. The sky nearly upon him, he carried those fingers across the holes he couldn't fall into, the stones he couldn't stumble over. That clickety, clack, clack, slurp, behind him. No longer cutting threads along the path. He could feel its presence, hear its jaw grind what had made him lose his lead. His finger, the smallest, ventured back a step to that spot it remembered, the one that had caused so much pain, and found that hole again, bottomless as it was, the hole that hadn't been there before, and he had made this journey countless times. He wasn't alone, after all. A trickster, a thief, reminded him that this was a battle, with wounds and worries and missed opportunities, obscured by the what was. Snow, he decided, is what the sky wept. And he followed those tears with notes painted in white, hand in hand, to whatever end may come. As you can see, I had a bit of a screen capture issue, but I think you can capture most of it. And here I am with my first line, the sky wept. And I'm a sucker for those, as you know. And hopefully that was evocative enough to get your attention. And here I have him contemplating, is it ash or is it snow? What a dilemma. I think it paints an interesting picture for leading us into this world. And now I move on to describing his features because he's an interesting looking guy. He's got no mouth. He looks like he's made of scar tissue. You can't even see any irises or pupil in his eyes. The only thing is his nose and his ears, in which I kind of regret in hindsight not exploring the sense of smell. Because if you remember from episode 12, I believe, the one called Friends, that was a really cool exercise in the five senses. And here I'm starting to bring the music element where the sky itself is singing. And he notices somebody at his feet, and that somebody is that small little weird dog behind him. I thought I would kind of move around this picture and just describe every little element and maybe, what the origin of it was. I'm not sure. And here I'm talking about the instrument on his lap and trying to describe the way he's playing the music. And I also point out the fact that his fingertips are maybe the only part of his body that are sensitive enough to feel things like these buttons and these holes. And then I decide to have him ask himself, who was he? But it's almost as if these questions are coming from a subconscious because as the mouth of his mind spoke, because he didn't have one, I thought it would be interesting. It's almost me in essence trying to figure out who this guy is on the page, but through his own head. And because really, I mean, look at this thing. It's very interesting to say the least, and it makes you wonder what this guy's story is. How did he get to this state? Is this some kind of alternate dimension or universe or plane of existence? And then here I have him playing along with the sky. He's squeezing the instrument as you do with a accordion, which this is the closest thing I can think of what I'm seeing before me. And it's kind of going back and forth. So he let the sky have a measure, the wind, which was the voice of the sky, of course. And here he reminds us that he is not one to steal the stage. He's not going to ham it up and show the sky or the wind that he's a better musician. And here I start to establish that maybe he's locked to this place. Maybe he's imprisoned here, so to speak. He can't get up. He hasn't been up in a long time. And then I show that he's trying to look out. He's trying to look around, but his vision isn't what it used to be. And he notices that small cup to the bottom right of the screen, and I just imagined like it looks like there's a fluid in there of some kind, which might have been a better story or another path to go down, but I imagined it to be a cup where patrons might give him money for his performance. And now we see the competitive nature of the sky, or I should say him, the sky personified. And neither could let the other win, else the world fall apart. So that was interesting. And that's when things started to become a little fable-like, I think, where this really is a stylized place, as stylized as the artwork. And nothing really is what it may seem. Almost as if he and the sky or the world above have to exist in harmony to keep things in balance, I guess. And then here I decide to pay attention to these wires that are around his chair, which I thought were kind of interesting. It reminded me of those little twist ties you get around electronic cables when you buy something like that. And then I'm always like twisting those up around my fingers and stuff. So I don't know. Maybe that's why it's not a prominent part of the image, but it just popped out to me, and I was just kind of moving my eyes across this page and trying to find all the little details. And then, speaking of the next detail, it is a seashell, and so I don't know, something about this landscape and this background here. Just I pictured like a howling wind and like the moaning of a seashell, and then I kind of do, I don't know if you want to call it world building or not, but there were no seashells anymore, meaning that maybe there were at some point, not anywhere. Um, so has the world fallen apart? Maybe. And then I also established that time is something that is lost to him. And I like to play with, I don't know, I wasn't really thinking of a fable as I was writing this, but I did do a little bit of word play here, like the voice hurling its voice in a spiral from that form that's further spiraled into a spiral in his ear, similar with the skittering of among the scattering. I don't know, just something I guess musical about the nature of the image, and then also just the abstractness of the whole thing. It made me feel like I needed to add a little bit more poetic flavor, I guess. Hopefully it's not too purple. And here I'm talking about his left elbow knocking that stick, and it's hollowed out, so it looks like it could be a walking stick of some kind. But I decided that it was going to create some kind of sound, a percussive sound, within its drum-like enclosure. And then here I start to allude to a woodwind instrument, being that it's hollow, but that memory is just fleeting, and he can't quite hold on to it. But on the bright side, it gave him a tempo to continue his song to. And here I'm talking about him looking over his metaphorical shoulder. So what I wanted to do here is create like an image, right? So he's locked to this seat. So I thought that maybe the music he's creating sort of strips him away from that, and he's looking down the path, and there's leaves and ash or snow, and I bring that back again. And we show that the sky is behind him, as if he's running down this path, driven by the music. And I decided to bring this little dog back, a skittering among the scattering. And I used that as a device, as you can see, that to kind of trip him up, literally. I say trip him up. Um, so it's almost like a tortoise and the hare situation, except rather than being lazy, there's a third party that kind of throws a wrench in things. And I think this is the conflict I needed. There really hadn't been any conflict so far. And I think every story should have some form of conflict, no matter how minor. Even though this felt like more of a character study than anything else, I always want to have some kind of chronological narration here. And that's when I decided to add the conflict. And it's toward the end. I didn't create a midpoint really, like I normally do, where things kind of just kick in and head toward the resolution. But I knew that I needed to bring the dog back. I wanted him to be an element. He looks like he's mischievous back there, kind of peeking around the chair or the bench that he's on. And I decided to bring him back to reality, or whatever reality this may be, to where he's pinned to this seat, but he knows that this dog is behind him. And here I'm starting to use his legs. What I did is I had his legs trip up along that path when he was running from the wind, essentially, which was the song. And I noticed that little hole, that little button missing on the right side, and I thought that would be a good element to sort of use the metaphor of his fingers to his legs. And I start to bring that back. So when he was tripping, that in fact was his fingers as he was playing the music. And here he brings back the dog, the trickster, a thief that reminded him that this was a dance, a battle. So almost this dog kind of brought him back. It humbled him in a way. And he's chewing on that little button part of his instrument that reminded him to, not get too cocky. And then finally, we bring it back. This was full circle to a degree. He decided that snow was what was falling, not ash. And it's kind of a positive ending. He realizes that he's part of this world. He's in balance with the wind and the songs that they create together, and that's it. It's almost as if he was trying to escape to a degree, or have some kind of enjoyment, or mischievous enjoyment, I guess, because maybe he's been here for thousands of years. Who knows? And he was just trying to bring some kind of just something different to his day to day. And I went over. I'm making good time. It's like 45 minutes or so, and I made it to the end already. That's pretty close to my first one, even though I ended at 40 something. I believe I ended around 55 minutes or so, which was pretty good. And quite surprised here. I'm not sure if this is as coherent as a story as I normally do, but I think that was part of it. I wanted to keep this character pinned to this spot for the entirety of the story, just because it doesn't look like he's going anywhere, and it looks like even if he did go somewhere, it wouldn't be that pleasant, just because he's kind of lost in this dark forest. And so, with the exception of his imaginative journey while he was racing the sky in song, he's always here. Why the little dog took the button? Did he really wanted to remind him that he shouldn't be cocky, and he had a purpose here, and that purpose was to play with the sky, and that was it. And it didn't require a ton of editing. And as I said, I think that this was almost freeing. I thought it was going to be really difficult, but it was almost freeing in a way to not see like a literal story in front of your eyes, and that allowed me to just kind of do a character study or a character portrait with some kind of narrative baked into that. So it wasn't just completely internal. There was some action there, albeit imaginary to a degree. So needless to say, I was quite surprised. And here I am at 1,000 already. Just minor tweaking, and only going through it one more time. And that's it. I think the most interesting thing about this story was it was second to my fastest time I'd ever done. Not by much, but I did get through the story pretty quickly, surprisingly. And it makes me wonder if the fact that there was really no apparent story there allowed me the freedom to just kind of go with it. It almost felt like a fable of some kind, where this guy was there for who knows how long, and really his only function was to play this music, and he was at odds with the sound of the sky or the wind. And there was a little bit of world building there. There was a little bit of him maybe contemplating who he was, where he came from. Had it always been this way? What was the world like? I really enjoy internal stories like that. Maybe that was a little bit too internal. I don't know. And I think really the challenge here was trying to find conflict. So the conflict being him at odds with the sky or the wind to create this music. And I almost alluded to the fact that it's this delicate balance there, and one can't win over the other. It's like this endless fight that they must go through for, who knows, eternity maybe. And that is the fable aspect I'm talking about. It had a very, I don't know, old world charm about it. It didn't quite get as dark as I thought it was going to. I mean, I alluded to the film Stalker in the beginning, which was a darker sci-fi tale, and also the music itself was quite dark. And I highly recommend you check it out if you're looking to write anything dark. It's going to help you. But for whatever reason, I didn't really go there. I don't know why. I tend to go to the very dark places in a lot of these stories I write. I think mostly because that appeals to me. I like that aspect of storytelling. I like tragic stories or stories that our protagonists learn something from, and it's a bit of a bittersweet ending. And I don't know that that was really here, and that's okay. I mean, I really enjoyed finding the story here, I think more than anything. Now, whether or not the story is any good, that's up to you to decide. You tell me in the comments. Let me know what you think, as always. At the very least, it was coherent and something. Honestly, it was a nice break from trying to create a very realistic narrative, or maybe realistic is the wrong word, but just visual narrative that takes you from one place to another, or perhaps feels just very steeped in reality. This one had a very fantastical feeling to it. And I don't mean fantasy, I mean that this place didn't exist, or it existed in some kind of parallel universe that was as stylized as the artwork itself. But it was a nice change of pace, and I hope you got something out of it. I hope you learned something from it. I hope you learned that, as I have, that things come from the most unexpected places, and trust your subconscious. Now, I'm not saying never outline. I typically outline my real stories that I'm coming up with, but this just keeps that subconscious muscle going. And I think when you over outline, you may lose a bit of that, because for me, the joy of discovery lies in the act of writing itself. And that's one of the reasons why this is one of my favorite exercises. But if you have any thoughts, if you have any comments, did you like the story? Did you not like the story? Do you have any artwork you'd like me to write to? Anything at all, I would love it. I would love to have something come out of left field, completely unexpected. And I hope you enjoyed this. I had a good time. I hope you did too. Thanks for watching. Keep reading, and obviously keep writing, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye. If you'd like to read this story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't add anything else. Promise. Thanks again.